Yo, what is going on, guys? You got Glop, and today you are probably shocked to be hearing my voice. It's been a minute since I've uploaded any content, but I definitely want to get back here into the swing of things. So without any further ado, today we're going to be taking a look at Week 7 of the DGBA. Per usual, we're going to be going over the team builder section as well as the actual battle itself. So if you would like to skip the team builder section, on your screen now, you are going to see a timestamp to jump right to the battle. And for those of you who are sticking around, I appreciate you. Let's go ahead and delve into this. So for this week's matchup, we're going up against the opponent Slap. He's one of the captains in the DGBA, and his roster consists of Charizard Mega, Landorus Therian, Raikou, Greninja, Metagross, Aromatisse, Shaman, Jellicent, Skuntank, Komala, Pineco, and Mienshao. And on screen, you should also be seeing my roster on the side there, so we can do a little side-on-side comparison. Now, when I first looked at this matchup, there were a few Pokemon that kind of jumped out to me as things that were going to be glaring issues. The first, of course, is the Charizard Mega. Notoriously good Pokemon. Just has the ability to sweep so many teams with Dragon Dance and its coverage options. Very difficult to wall. I mean, luckily we've got Hippowdon here, as you can see, the first member I decided to bring. But coupling it with some of his other threats, it's going to put a lot of pressure on the defensive nature of my team. So Greninja and Shaman were the next two that really jumped out to me. I think together they can form a very sinister duo that's going to, again, it's going to put a lot of pressure on my defensive team. Greninja, of course, having access to spikes, toxic spikes, that's going to be a threat, as well as Shaman just being able to kind of sit in and wall a lot of my Pokemon. It can pretty much shrug off attacks from Hippowdon, Starmie, a lot of my other Pokemon, and just throw off these Leech Seeds, annoy Tangrowth with Air Slash, annoy Celesteela with Leech Seeds, so it's got a lot of ways to harass our team. And the last member that is a threat to me personally is Jellicent, for kind of a similar reason as to Shaman. You know, it's got access to Taunt, Will-O-Wisp, Scald. It's got a lot of ways to shut down my defensive Pokemon and really put a stop to what they want to do, so I've got to make sure to play carefully around those. So again, when I first looked at this matchup, I instantly knew that Charizard was going to be the biggest threat, and that's why I'm bringing Hippowdon this week. It's also going to give us a nice ground immunity for the Raikou, so it can't just freely throw off Volt Switches. And the set is pretty straightforward on this guy here. We're just using max HP, max defense, and we're using Stealth Rock, of course, for residual damage, Earthquake to actually threaten damage on that Charizard, Slack Off to keep ourselves healthy, and Whirlwind to get rid of Charizard if it goes for a Dragon Dance, for example. This could also be helpful versus a Swords Dance Lando T. And let's say there's a weakness policy Metagross that gets up in agility. This is just a nice safety net to get that threat out of the picture and allow our team to continue doing what we want to do. So I thought that this was kind of a no-brainer. Rocky Helmet, of course, to give additional recoil to Charizard. And yeah, that's really all there is to say about this guy. The next member we have here is Maddie. Now, this is our Tangrowth with Regenerator. I'm using Assault Vest this week. It's going to help us combat both the Raikou and the Greninja, and to a certain extent the Shaman as well. And it's right here that I think it's really important from a team building standpoint to understand what your Pokemon is going to be tasked with handling. And so what I mean by this is that obviously, Tangrowth is going to be pressured by not only the Greninja, but the aforementioned Shaman. And so I've got to make sure that I've got other Pokemon that can come in on those Pokemon every now and then, so that Tangrowth is not always just coming in and taking damage, right? Because again, as I mentioned, if spikes are up, it's really a lot more difficult for Tangrowth to come in and take these hits repeatedly. Somebody else has to be able to kind of cushion these predicted hits on the switch. So we're using Knockoff to get rid of items. Giga Drain is obligatory stab for the Greninja. We've got Earthquake here to, I believe it almost always 2-hit KOs Raikou. Also does damage to Charizard and the Metagross. And then Sludge Bomb is nice, just as a way to kind of threaten poisons on his team. He does have that Aromatisse that can help get rid of status, but Sludge Bomb really does help kind of limit that thing's efficiency, because if we get a poison on that, now it's pressured between, okay, do I go for Heal Bell or do I go for a Wish to keep a teammate healthy? And it's kind of going to make him choose a 50-50 kind of scenario. So that's why I'm bringing Tangrowth here. The next member we have is Moltres, and this is a really interesting set. It's kind of an annoying set meant to kind of slow down his offense, but it also does offer us a few very crucial defensive rules. So we've got Substitute here to block status from things like the Jellicent, or maybe Metagross if it wants to run Toxic, maybe in anticipation of my Hippowdon, for example. We've got Toxic of our own to put pressure onto the Charizard, the Landorus, anything that might want to come in, even Greninja, for example, right? If we get Greninja on a timer, that's huge for us because that's going to make Tangrowth's job of walling the rest of the special attackers that much easier. We've also got Flamethrower just as our general stab and Roost to keep ourselves healthy. Now, something to note, this EV spread is a little bit crazy. We've got max HP to, maximize our bulk. We have 32 defense EVs, which I don't have a specific calc that I can pull up, but there is one I can pull up at least for the special defense EVs, and I want to highlight that here. Again, because I do feel like Shaman is a big threat, and it's not realistic for Tangrowth to have to be able to deal with it every time it comes in. I need to have other ways to get around it. So let me go ahead and pull up the Moltres here, and then I have Shaman already pulled up. And if I throw on Psychic here, oops, there we go. So as you can see with this specific EVs and special defense, it's a very, very low chance for us to ever even get 3-hit KO'd by Psychic, which is pretty important too when you consider that if they just go for Seed Flare, there's a good chance they're going to drop my SPDF. So this is always going to ensure that I'll be able to live the Psychic at -2 SPDF, and I'll kind of highlight that here as well. So as you can see, Seed Flare initially won't be doing that kind of damage. It was doing like the 14 to 17. We're always going to be living the Psychic afterwards if he does get the SPDF drop, and we have to stay in. So that's just kind of my idea there. The defense EVs, I believe, was just for certain calcs versus Charizard X, where in a lasted situation, we basically make it choose, okay, does it get up a Dragon Dance and take a Toxic, or does it kill us off, not get a Dragon Dance up, and then allow Hippowdon to come in and finish it off? So again, it has a defensive niche of being able to, put a timer on Charizard, while also threatening out the Metagross, threatening the Lando T to a certain extent. We've got enough speed here where I feel like his Lando's probably not going to be running this much speed, and so if it has Stone Edge, we can actually PP stall that with pressure and substitute. So the next member I have here is Heracross, and this is pretty much just always one of our go-to breakers. I didn't really feel like this was a matchup to bring Urshifu into because, again, they do have the Jellicent, which hard walls both of our main stabs on Urshifu. So I'm instead electing to use Heracross here, and the set is rather straightforward. We just got Close Combat for our obligatory stab. We've got Rock Blast to hit the Lando a little bit harder. We've got Knockoff here to get rid of items on things like the Aromatisse and the Lando T as well. And I figured that Aromatisse might, it might be running max defense, and if so, it's probably not even worth it to run Smart Strike. I'd rather just get rid of its item, and then as I mentioned earlier, that thing taking repeated Sludge Bombs is going to be very difficult for it to withstand and actually keep itself healthy throughout the game. And of course, if you couple that with Spikes, for example, now does come in take Spikes, it might be taking Sandstorm damage from a Hippowdon, it might be taking Poison damage from Sludge Bomb. It's not going to be able to keep the rest of its team healthy for long. So this is just kind of my thought process with all of these moves here. The speed EVs are just to make sure that we outspeed Adamant, Max Speed, Metagross, and a few other threats. I think I had speed in here maybe for prior to Mega Evolution, but I can't recall. It's been about, I want to say, a month and a half, 2 months since I had this battle. The next member I have here is Celesteela, and I haven't really brought Celesteela like ever. I think this is the first week I brought it since the very first week that we played, when we had the captain's team that we took over with. So kind of interesting here. We're bringing Celesteela this week. We got Leech Seed, pretty much the go-to move for Celesteela. I mean, that's what it's known for, is being a fatty that never dies. We've got Heavy Slime here for our nice stab option. Going to be putting pressure on that Aromatisse, as well as just generally hitting everything else kind of hard. We've got Protect to ensure that we get some extra recovery from leftovers and the Leech Seed. And then I've got some special attack EVs you can see here, and that's really just to help combat the Shaman again. So I'm actually going to pull up Celesteela's set here, and as you can see, if he's running no HP on the Shaman, Air Slash is always going to be a 2-hit KO, and even if he's running like a good amount, oh, that's 9. That is not a good amount. I meant to do 180. Like, even if he's running a lot, we still got a pretty good chance to do some big damage to it. I feel that that's sufficient, because again, if we have Sand up, for example, you can see here. Let me throw on the Sandstorm. Yeah, exactly. It's a 99. It's basically a 100% chance to 2-hit KO after Sandstorm damage. That's assuming no leftovers. If there are leftovers, it becomes a little bit more complex, but we can at least force that thing to go for a rest and switch out, which is what we want. We don't want Shaman staying in and just, fucking up the club. Now we have some spit FEVs here again to help combat the Shaman. That's also going to help versus Greninja too. And that goes back to what I was talking about a little bit earlier in the match, or a little bit earlier in the team building section rather, where I don't want Tangrowth to feel like it has to come in every single time versus those two Pokemon. I've got to have other ways to pivot around them so that I can keep this thing healthy and try to avoid status. So Celesteela is just going to kind of help cushion against the Greninja. You know, if it's choice locked, we can get a Leech Seed on it, we can protect, scout what it's going to go for, make it a lot easier for the team to pivot around. Finally, our last member here is going to be Starmie. And this set is pretty straightforward. Again, I'm using heavy duty boots because of the aforementioned toxic spikes that Greninja might be using, but it's also going to help keep this thing healthy because I don't want it coming in and taking all this repeated hazard damage. It needs to be able to get off that spin. And getting off the spin is going to be pretty difficult to do considering there is a Jellicent, so that's why I'm actually electing to use Toxic. If we can put that thing on a timer, later on in the game, we can whittle it down with all of our other team, and we can eventually get rid of Jellicent, and that's going to allow us to get off that spin, which is going to make Hippowdon's job easier, going to make Tangrowth's job easier, so that's just something to kind of keep in mind. We got Recover to keep ourselves healthy. We have Scald to just put pressure on everything else, you know, throw out risk and threaten to burn, for example. And then, of course, Rapid Spin to get rid of the hazards. Toxic is also nice here, too, because say that it's like a Sword Stance Charizard, and it manages to get past Hippowdon. After all the recoil, it might not be in range still of Scald. So Toxic is a way to 100% guarantee that that thing, well, not 100%, you know, this move is 90% accurate. But it's a good way to kind of try to guarantee that Charizard isn't going to go stupid and just mess everybody up. So that's it for the team building section, guys. I'm going to go ahead and pivot now into the battle, and I will see you there. Alright guys, so we're here for the battle, and unfortunately this is my second time recording this. I was going through it and my music stopped looping for no reason. Very upset about that, but anyways, looking at the matchup here, I'm quite happy. I don't see any Shaman, so we don't need to worry about that thing harassing my team. There's also no Metagross, and that's pretty important to note because it means that I always get free Toxics, as well as Sludge Bomb is pretty, like, no drawback, because I can always threaten to get a poison on something, and that's going to be putting a lot more pressure on the Aromatisse to come in and heal that off. So, knowing that, I'm going to go ahead and lead off here with Starmie, as they like to lead off with their Charizard, and that's basically a free Toxic for me. Unfortunately, we do end up missing it, so again, free with air quotes. And this turn I really had to think, is it worth it to go for another one, just because I know I'm going to have to eat a Shadow Ball? I figured the answer was yes, again, knowing that something always has to take a poison. And I do want to pressure that Aromatisse into going for Heal Bell. Unfortunately, they're going to score a critical hit, and that's pretty much going to take Starmie out of the game, just because I don't really have a lot of opportunities to heal up. I can heal up in front of maybe the Aromatisse, and maybe the Landorus, depending on what moves it's got, but it looks pretty bleak. So Starmie, unfortunately, kind of out of the game on turn 2, so I'm already at a big deficit. I'm going to pull switch here into my Tangrowth, and thankfully they just go for a Shadow Ball, no Toxic or any status move. And this is going to allow me, again, to just throw off a Sludge Bomb, because if I get a Poison on Aromatisse, that is huge. That thing is going to be underneath a lot of pressure. Now, I don't see an item here, so I was thinking, okay, maybe they have a berry like Babiri, or maybe they have like a Pinch Berry. We don't see any berry activate here, so I'm still unsure at this point in time what the item is. But I'm just going to keep clicking Sludge Bomb, because again, it's in my favor. If I get that poison on Aromatisse, it's going to be 2-hit KO'd by the next Sludge Bomb. Still not able to land a poison, unfortunately, so I'm just going to pull switch here into Celesteela, and they're going to get in their Charizard, which is big for them. They get the Mega Evolution off for free. I'm just going to throw out my Hippowdon, get up that sand, get some residual damage on this thing, and as you can see, we're eating that up. And they're already at 60% now, so it's basically like we're at the same percent. But of course, I need to make sure to keep Hippowdon healthy. It's going to be crucial to keeping that Charizard in check. On the next turn here, I'm going to elect to get up my Stealth Rock, knowing that now when Charizard comes in, it's going to be at basically like 35%, and if Sand's up, it's at 30, meaning that it's going to be forced to recover, and I can play around it more easily. So I'm going to go for an Earthquake here, just going to want to see what Aromatisse wants to do, as it does go for Aromatherapy. And on this next turn, unfortunately, my opponent misclicks. They go for Aromatherapy again. I'm sure they wanted to go for Wish. But as you can see, that's not too big of a deal, because as it was revealed in my team builder, I do have Whirlwind, and so for those who don't know, if somebody goes for Protect and you Whirlwind on that, it actually goes through. So now they're not able to get the Wish for themselves, meaning that Aromatisse is stuck at 1%. So even if they do get rid of Stealth Rock at any point, it's basically dead, because all of my Pokemon outspeed it and can knock it out at 1%. So that's great for us. I'm going to switch out here. Don't want to take a Toxic or anything like that. Gonna throw out Celesteela as they go up for the Defog. And this is a relatively free Leech Seed for me. Just gonna be able to start harassing their team, get some residual damage on anybody. And that's a reason why I thought Shaman would come too, right? Because Leech Seed is so free for Celesteela if they don't. Either way, I pull a switch here into Tangrowth, not wanting to take an electric type attack. And here I had to really think about this because I knew there was some status move on this thing. I'm like, it's either Toxic or Will-O-Wisp. I wasn't sure, but somebody's got to take it. And it doesn't really make sense for me to like go out to Celesteela, you know, risk a burn on that thing because then Celesteela is basically dead. So I take this as an opportunity to get a knockoff here, and I do get a crit, which is quite fortunate for us, but the big thing is just getting rid of recovery on Jellicent, making it that much easier for my team to beat down. So I'm going to pull a switch here, pretty aggressive switch actually, into Heracross, and it's basically this point in the game where I'm like, I will get ahead, and I will make so much progress right now if I just don't get burned. It's pretty risky to make a play like this, but I really feel like there were not a lot of other options. So I'm going to go ahead and Mega Evolve, go for the knockoff. Thank God we do not get burned by Scald, which is huge, because we now force a lot of progress. They're going to sack off Aromatisse, and they're going to get some Rocky Helmet chips, so now the item is revealed here. And they can now go into Greninja, and I don't want to take any kind of attack from this thing. Just going to go out to my Tangrowth, seeing it as it's my best response. And this is excellent, because I believe I just get another Sludge Bomb off here. Yep, going to go for the Sludge Bomb. Still not getting a poison, unfortunately, but either way, we have a great response to this Charizard. As I mentioned, they're forced to recover, and because they're forced out here, I can pretty easily just get my Stealth Rock up again. And you can see there's kind of this like rinse-repeat cycle of getting up Stealth Rock, going to Celesteela, getting the Leech Seed, but overall, this is a net gain for me, right? Because I have more Stealth Rock than they have Defog. Sandstorm is up, which hits a lot of their team, and Leech Seed, they have no switch into that. So with all these exchanges playing out the way they are, Tangrowth isn't really taking any net damage because they don't have hazards up, right? So I'm getting ahead every time this scenario plays out. So I can just go for another Leech Seed here. This is basically confirming that Landorus can't really touch my Celesteela. It wouldn't make sense for them to have a boosting move like Sword Stance, Earthquake. Makes no sense because, again, there is a whole Celesteela here. So either way, gonna pull a switch here into my Heracross because, again, this is gonna force progress now where they either have to give me the Jellicent or they give me leftovers on Landorus, which is so huge because now this thing is gonna be so much easier to wear down throughout the course of the battle. And right here, I make a very aggressive play. I know the U-turn's coming out. I know they don't have any move to hit my Heracross. So I'm just going to go for a Spike because, again, this is going to condition them into wanting to defog again so that I can keep my cycle up. And again, I felt like this is pretty free because, as you can see, U-turn does, like, no damage. They're going to bring out Greninja here. I'm going to show some respect to that thing. I'm going to go with Celesteela, and this play was kind of an interesting one. I basically just wanted to scout and see if they had Ice Beam. The last time Greninja was on the field, I showed that Tangrowth was my immediate response. So if they go for Ice Beam, I actually can get 2-hit KO'd by that. So I really need to respect this thing. Celesteela at this point doesn't really do anything for me, again, because there's no Shaman. So I figure may as well just use it to kind of, you know, face tank some Ice Beams. Either way, they go for a U-turn, nice play in there, and that's going to allow them to get in their Raikou. But as you can see, I'm really coming out in these exchanges because Tangrowth always just comes in, takes like no damage, and they're taking hazard damage. They're sometimes taking Sandstorm damage when that's up. So right here, I figured that Giga Drain is pretty free. If they want to try to go for Ice Beam and get cheeky, then I can get a big KO on them. But they go into Landorus, and that's big damage. Again, you can see this is great because they have no leftovers. So this thing is slowly but surely getting worn down. They're going to keep up the momentum, go for a U-turn. They're going to allow them to get back in the Raikou. But as you can see, this thing's already at 60% just from hazards. So I'm never going to choke here and go out into my Hippowdon. I need to make sure that thing is at full health all the time for that Charizard. So they go for a Volt Switch here. Nice play in their end. Going to allow them to get back in their Charizard, but as we've seen from the previous series of turns, that's just a free Hippowdon for me. And there's no need to predict in this next turn. As we've seen, they do have Landorus there as a potential switch-in, but I figure why not just throw off an Earthquake? If they have Will-O-Wisp or Toxic, they might go for it now, knowing that they can live the Earthquake. So I just go for an Earthquake here as they go into Jellicent, maybe expecting Stealth Rock. And that's great for me because I'm able to get that thing out of the picture. So as you can see right now, things are getting pretty dire for them. They have, no means of recovery, and the big thing, there's two big things to notice here. Number one, Landorus is on a timer, no recovery, and the other three members are all hit by Hazards and Sandstorm. So if I continue playing it out the way I am, I'm ultimately going to come out on top because the other Pokemon are going to just die from Sandstorm, which is kind of funny to think about, but that's actually what's going to happen. So No reason for me to stay in here. Gonna go out to my Celesteela knowing that I fully wall this Landorus. And again, another free leech seed for me. I could have maybe heavy slammed in this turn, maybe going for an aggressive play, but again, I feel like sticking to my game plan is always the way to go. I know U-turn's coming out here too, so I can again just go for another leech seed, as my opponent is going to make a really nice double switch here. I've gone out to my Hippowdon every single time, so they need to make some kind of initiative here. They go out into their Greninja, and I figure here, if you have Spike, you should go for that. Because, again, my Starmie isn't really going to get a lot of opportunities to get rid of these hazards. And at this point, I feel like you need to hazard stack versus me to chip my Tangrowth and my Hippowdon so that I can't keep walling these attacks. Either way, though, I figure right here, because I'm kind of down in this position, no real reason to hang on to Starmie. Just going to let this thing go as they go for a U-turn. And the reason I did this is that if they go for Ice Beam on that turn, they actually have a chance to win. Because Tangrowth, as I mentioned, can get 2-hit KO'd with the combination of Ice Beam, Stealth Rock, and Toxic. So we need to show this thing some respect. Gonna let Starmie go down here as they go out into their Raikou. But again, as you can see, they're just taking damage. Like, Sandstorm is adding up with these hazards. This is gonna let me get in my Tangrowth here, and again, I'm just gonna go for a Sludge Bomb. No switching. Unfortunately, I believe they said this was a misclick, but I do want to kind of touch on this here because even if they had gone out into their Charizard in this turn, not the greatest position for them, because again, you're taking Sandstorm damage, you're taking Sludge Bomb damage, and as you can see, I got a Poison. So with Charizard being on a timer, they don't really have a win condition at this point. I don't think I mentioned it yet, but I've calced damage on the Greninja. It is choice specs. We're not sure what Raikou's item is, so it could be like Calm Mind late game. We're not entirely sure, but I don't really see Raikou beating my team. I think Charizard's the only thing you have to actually break through the rest of my Pokemon. So getting a Poison on Greninja is great because this thing is basically on a timer. And again, I'm going to make a similar play to earlier on in the battle. Don't want to take an Ice Beam Tangrowth. Just going to go out to my Celesteela. Its health is not at all important in this battle. And I just go for a Protect here, maybe wanting to see, are they indeed Choice Lock? Because I'm not sure at this point in the battle. And I know that I take a Thunderbolt here, so I'm just going to stay in, go for another Leech Seed, basically just kind of pressure their team again and maybe, you know, keep doing my whole switch around thing. They're going to double out into Raikou, I believe, as I go into Hippowdon. And basically at this point in the game, like, they kind of have to choke. Or they kind of have to bank on me, rather, going for a choke here, which would be like me staying in, for example. Because for those who don't know, Raikou now has access to Scald in the 8th generation. And I know this, so I'm not going to let Hippowdon take that. I'm going to go out into my Tangrowth here, as they do indeed end up going for the Scald. Not going to do a whole lot of damage to us, thanks to our Assault Vest. And again, this is just another free Sludge Bomb for me. Like, I just get ahead by clicking the funny move. They're going to go out into Charizard. No Poison, unfortunately. But this is still fine because they are forced into a recovery position, and that's great for us because now I get in Hippowdon, and I get pretty free Stealth Rocks up here. And this is just going to be adding to the whole residual damage that they're taking. So they're going to go out into Landorus here. I believe they want to go for a Defog in the subsequent turn. They do, yep. And I think I just get him up again, maybe. Oh, no, I slack off, keeping myself healthy. I then get him up again, I believe. And then here, I go out into Moltres. Yep, so this is kind of an aggressive play here. I'm fairly confident at this point the last move is not Stone Edge. That doesn't make any sense. So I figure you make one of two plays here. Either you go for a U-turn, or you go for Defog. If you go for Defog, then Moltres is already in, and I'm pretty darn sure, based on damage that I'd seen from earlier with my calcs, that this Landorus doesn't really have a lot of speed, and we do. So I know that we can just go for a very free Flamethrower here and knock this thing out, and that's huge for us. I also felt pretty confident about that play because Raikou doesn't want to take that hit, Greninja would faint, and if they go out into Charizard, now I can threaten with Toxic. So overall, I felt like that was my best course of action to kind of speed up the battle. Gonna switch out here into Celesteela. Again, its health isn't really important for anything. They're gonna get the Raikou back in, and I always have that Tangrowth just chilling in the back, so I'm gonna throw that boy out as they go for a Volt Switch, doing no damage to us. And you can see that it's pretty much kind of coming up to a close here because they've just got no way to really win this. They pull a double in the Raikou, which is great. But again, as I mentioned, you look at these three Pokemon remaining for them, none of them are immune to sand. So even if they make all the double switches in the world, once I get up one more hazard, it's just over. Because every time they switch, they're taking sand, they're taking residuals from hazards. There's really no way for them to win at this point. So I'm just going to keep playing out my game plan the way I've been doing it. Going to go for a Earthquake here because as you can see, there's no Earthquake switching. Raikou dies, Greninja dies, and it's going to force Charizard into a recovery position, which is going to allow me again to go out here into my Hippowdon. Kind of just doing the same shit, being a little bit lame, you know, a little bit cheesy. And I think right here I just go for Earthquake. Yep, because again, there's no Earthquake switching. They go into Raikou, and they really need me to choke here, but again, I'm not going to give it to them. Always going to go out into my Tangrowth here. No reason to lose the game because of that. They're going to get in Charizard, of course, and this is really their opportunity to just go for that Dragon Dance. But again, we have the full health of Powdon here, max defense, max HP. We can take this for days. Even if they crit this Flare Blitz, I'm pretty darn sure there's a good chance we live. And as you can see, we tanked that with ease. A crit would have done about what? Like 90 something? So we still would have lived that. They're going to win Raikou here, and again, the game's pretty much over. We can just go out into Tangrowth as Calm Mind is revealed. So it looked like this was a set that was meant to gather momentum in the mid game and maybe clean up late game. But since we played we played this game so well, it's like there's no way we're going to lose to it. Thunderbolt's going to do pitiful damage here, and Earthquake is going to be able to seal out the game. So that'll be our match versus Slap, a 5-0. I would say it's a pretty convincing win in our favor. But I don't want to take any credit away from them. I think that there was definitely a way for them to win. First off, they had a couple misclicks, definitely very detrimental. But another really big thing here I want to stress is that they definitely had a shot in this game if they had spikes on Greninja. And I think they should have gone for it because that's kind of how Greninja like does its thing, right? A lot of its checks and counters are grounded like bulky waters, bulky grasses. So if you put up spikes, those Pokemon are forced to take like entry hazard damage every time, and it makes it easier for Greninja to like break or bullshit its way past them, right? Like so like Choice Specs Dark Pulse. When you get these, like, when you get Tangrowth and other fat mons into range of those attacks, you can just throw off a Dark Pulse, because they're, like, forced to recover or forced to switch out. You can either get a flinch, or you just get damage on another team member, and it kind of just snowballs from there. So, I think if they had prioritized getting up hazards, they would have had a lot easier time versus my team. And I don't think they had a way to break, you know? They were pretty much relying on this Choice Spec Greninja, and again, it can definitely do it, but the only way it's ever going to do it is if you have those hazards up. You would need something with a little bit more immediate power, so maybe like a Sword Stance Landorus set, but at that point you're maybe giving up hazards of your own, or you're giving up Defog, so Charizard's going to be under a lot more pressure. It's kind of a hard decision to make. I think that they maybe wanted to bring Shaman, bring Spikes on Greninja, and maybe leave Raikou, because I don't see Raikou doing anything into Powdon and Tangrowth. Like, sure, it does great versus the other four, but you just can't, like, you're not breaking past the Powdon and Tangrowth that easily, so... Either way, great game here to Slap. This is going to be it for our Week 7 game, and I will see you guys in the next episode. Peace.